We're ready to go official. Okay, good afternoon. Call to order the meeting for the Comprehensive Plan Review Committee. Attendance, we have board members Steve Hewins, Carl Coles, and myself, and then Wendy Pryor, board member, we're waiting for updates for the bylaws, so won't be voting but participating. Okay, we have 3 members, so we do have a quorum. Thank you for everyone being here. Cindy sent her regrets, she couldn't be here today. And I'm sure that's all we're missing, right? Yeah. And then 1 is to be appointed from the town of Rangeley as well, right? Joe, one of the select board members is gonna come on.
Oh.
Once they get the bylaws information from me, which I apologize.
Well, they're supposed to fill that seat anyways, right?
That'll be at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so, okay, any adjustments to the agenda? Don't see any. Let's have Donna, who's here, to our consultant, which is great. And Joe in the corner, quarterback, and the everything else. Okay, let's go to the meeting minutes. We all received those by email. I didn't see any issues. Someone carry a motion to approve?
So moved. A second.
Okay, all in favor? Passes 3-0. Thank you. Okay, old business. Discussion of the historic resources draft. Wendy had some comments, or she was able to go on and look at it?
Yeah, I went into the Google document and just did some wordsmithing, editing. Mainly, I think it's because some of the words got put together as one. Probably when you copy and pasted it, that happens all the time in Google Docs. But I think it's well done. I love the inclusion of the archaeological sites. I think that that's a really interesting, I never even knew it. I felt like I was learning something when I was reading it. It was great. It was well done and well written, and I think it's a good piece of work.
Yeah, the only thing that I would change on them, and I haven't done that yet, is just when we have the recommendations, well, I thought we were gonna use words like consider.
It is changed on that now.
Oh, it is?
Yep.
Okay, I hadn't made that.
But we made those kind of changes.
Yeah,
Perfect.
Um,
Well,
I
never mind.
apologize, I have not given it my editor eye yet, but I will try to do that post haste.
Please do, yeah, I'll take a read close.
And one of the recommendations too, and for the natural resource component as well, I was reviewing that today as well. There are requirements from the state. And then farther in the document, it's like, this is what Rangeley's ideas are. I think those 2 directive sentences need to be like separated, and the font in that document, because it's picked up from the old comp plan, is horrible with those big giant letters like floating around in there. And then there's huge spaces in between words. So
I'm a big fan of Arial at times. New Roman,
yeah, something that's
standard.
really
I
easy
agree.
to read, you know.
Yeah, I just feel
The whole thing
comprehension's
now.
better. I mean, I do, every legal document I do in Times New Roman use is pretty,
It's easy to read.
Right, because it's a
Standard.
serif font.
you can't miss an I for an L or anything.
Right. So for the state requirements, I would say that you wouldn't have to have suggestive language for those, because those have to be done, correct?
Yeah, the more,
At minimum.
we had talked about as a whole, if we want to go down that rabbit hole a bit, we had talked about as a whole, wherever possible in the document that we can reference state statute, we're going to reference it. Because then we're covered. If the state statute changes, if the state statute's amended, if it's repealed and then replaced, it's all referenced back to that. The more we can use the core source documents, I think, from the state legislative titles, then we're protected if there's a change, and it keeps us from having to revamp. And I think, at least from most of the feedback I've gotten from the community over the year, if the state sets the guideline, it's usually less restrictive, and most people seem supportive of that. We wanna go more restrictive, we've gotta be clearly outlining.
When you're talking about the
Right,
reference,
makes
right,
sense.
it's not shall consider adopting state statutes, we must at minimum, right? Is that
Right,
correct?
and I think that's where you can have more of a,
Yeah, in those cases,
But-
Yeah, the comp plan is going to follow
Yeah, state statute.
Right.
the state
And
statute.
then for Rangeley's visionary ideas, that's what you should consider. And then, do the committees and boards can do actual work, or
I think-
town employees.
Yeah, I think you're right on the right track with that. Any other comments related to Steve's
The
historic?
only thing I would add to that is that Michelle Landry from the Historical Society has that now, and she's looking at it. We got a board meeting, another board meeting tomorrow, and she said she's gonna give me her any comments she has. Make
Right.
sure I'm, historically correct, actually. So,
It was good though.
And I think the more we can get away from, other than tying in, I feel like as much as we do with facts, as long as we have facts in reference of time, then I think we're fine. I just feel like sometimes how to instantly date a document is, our statistics are gonna be outdated the first year we've done it, so. I think the more we can show trend data and show where things have gone, and then talk in that consider or this, and then I even think we should try to put in some guidelines to say, based on analysis and that we feel that once you start approaching this threshold, then other things need to be considered. We've, I think we're,
Toggling, yeah.
Joe's dealing with that now. We've reached a certain threshold with calls, so that the fire chief has said, we really need a third officer, which was set up, and then the police chief has said, due to where we're at, we need to be there. I think the more we can, not necessarily say, but just say, this is the trend data, and this is how things are going, but as we approach this, we're going to need to consider making some adjustments on personnel and staffing
based on current data.
based on current data.
You know.
I don't think that's a big leap, and I don't think it handcuffs the Board of Selectmen and the committees from
Right.
taking that. If anything, it provides some guidance saying, we've looked at the past 30 years and it fluctuates, but however, we're trending this way. I think it's important, I don't know, that's just kind of the amateur scientist in me, I always like to think about. I think this document to me is gotta be as much looking back as looking forward. And if we really want it utilized, I think it's important that we track that. Perfect. All right, so should we go to Joe with the plantation meeting? I see him and Don over there.
Yeah.
How exciting was
there
it?
too. There was a great turnout. I think it was the most highly attended quarterly meeting that I've been to. 3 plantations were represented at the table. There was one that was absent, as I recall. We discussed, I introduced the new police chief. He only represents Rangeley, but we wanted to make sure that the community knew him and how things were going over here. He did extend the invitation to plantations if they want to discuss sharing police services, that opportunity is there, and it didn't extend much further than that, but there seemed to be some interest, at least from Dallas, and possibly talking about that down the road. I shared the new fire service contract with Sandy River that the board of selectmen has executed with Sandy River. It's just a little expanded over the previous version, and I let the other folks know, the other plantations know, that the town of Rangeley will favor this format for all plantations when it's new again. There was no discussion about the formula, the fire formula, that did not come up. And we're not in any danger there. I just know that that's been a buzzword in some of the meetings, that maybe that could be looked at over the next year or two.
Well, I know one thing that always pops up with them that they ask about historically has been is, if the fire department comes in under budget based on what's being shared, does that roll over the part there, or does it just go into Rangeley's reserve? That was often a common question I heard in the presentation.
So there's a pretty easy answer to that. There's a 1-year delay in billing. So plantations are billed actuals a year after the fact. So,
Fantastic.
yeah.
So a while there, that was a little,
There's a little discussion
Squishy.
about what happens with overdrafts, and we've worked out an arrangement in the contract with Sandy River, basically. We expect to be paid reasonable overdrafts in their budget. It's subject, they have the right to review it.
Right.
Obviously, is their requirement, what they're required.
Good.
So those are a couple operational things. The meat and potatoes in terms of planning, Breck spoke some about regional issues. So the plantations have kind of chimed in that plantations and builders and others have chimed in that there's some frustration with the expediency of LUPEC and their ability to kind of keep up. And Ben Godso was in the room and took all of that information stoically.
Oh, is he there now?
He is the manager, he works for the commission directly, but he manages planning for LUPEC. So he came up and he took all the feedback, and then he explained that there are provisions in statute that allow communities to do regional planning activities and enforcement. So, he was listening to it, and he said, there are avenues available to you if you want to, either as one plantation or a group of plantations or as a complete region want to get together and tackle this. And of course, I'm paraphrasing this. But one of the other big elements that came up, of course, Saddleback was in the room, which is good. And, they talked about, some of the challenges that Saddleback is facing with LUPEC. They're having trouble developing where they want to develop, which is, kind of close to, where the lodges and so forth. They're not talking about developing on the side, they want to develop close to the road and the facilities. But it's a challenge with LUPEC, and from what I gathered from Ben, if there are some changes in how the planning structure is set up, as long as it's, I don't remember the word you use, you might know, as long as it's conforming with what the commissioners allow, that's a possibility to kind of shift things around a little bit, as long as there's, the process is followed.
Might be a little complicated with Saddleback because they're a contract zone.
Well, that came up too.
They're
But-
DVD.
And the DEP doesn't ever get any less restrictive than the DEP is now. That was very clear from them.
Oh, yeah, no.
DEP, that never subtracts.
The biggest problem they have is personnel.
Yeah.
They've got kids in there that are 23, 24, 25, 26 that they're putting into these
Mhm.
permit reviews. And
Right.
guys like me get paid to call them
Right.
and say, turn to page 27, column 4, section B, this is what applies. And then they're like, oh, okay.
You don't talk that nice.
I do. I like them. I like them.
But,
They don't know, they're young.
The takeaway for me, and I'll wrap up with this, the takeaway was, this is my thoughts from what I heard. Saddleback needs some help with zoning up there. And it's my opinion that they are, and it's a fact that they're an economic driver in the community. So I was trying to figure out what's Rangeley's role in this. I don't totally know what that is yet, but we at least need to be at the table and help where we can, because we are all in the same region here. So that's kind of my takeaway. I don't know what the next step is there. I think folks need to digest what they heard the other night and think about whether we want to approach, we or parts of the community want to approach LUPEC and talk about how we can have more control, regional control.
I'm assuming that's probably a long duration process to
It's really not too bad.
involve.
You really don't talk to them, you just secede from them, but you have to have an approved plan.
Yeah, I'm talking about as far as it reflects to the comprehensive plan, right? And do we just put language in here to continue to?
Say that we continue to work towards regionalization of services that will provide for the community as a whole. Benefit to the community as a whole. I think we can cover it that way.
And we did, Donna spoke to an update, she updated the room on, your work. And she also talked about the importance of just the meeting itself the other night, I touched on that too. That is laid out in our comprehensive plan to at least get together and talk about regional issues.
Right.
Whether it's the LUPEC issue or the fire department or whatever it may be, is having that relationship with the plantations. And Donna did update them on what the comp plan is and that it affects Rangeley, the municipality of Rangeley. We're doing it every, like we do every 10 years, but we certainly want their feedback if they have anything. So that's it in a nutshell. Donna, if I missed anything, or Rick, if I missed anything, let me know.
you know, when Ben was talking, he was enthusiastic. I thought.
He said the word excited, he said he was
Yeah, he's like,
excited.
I'm really excited about this, I think you should do it.
They all,
The representative.
Donna, being a guy who's worked with LUPC since 2008, that's the normal bureaucratic thing, and I like Ben, Ben's a
Yeah,
great guy.
yeah,
I've known him a long time, he used to be involved with the High Peaks, he did a lot with that for a lot of
Mhm.
years. You know. Great, but I mean, the hardest part is really what we could do to help with that is quite easily could do that, is to standardize the stuff, because the problem is they don't have a person like Brett and a person like Carl that you can call up and say, I got this 90% done, but I got these 4 or 5 questions. Instead, what people have to do is they can't get anyone on the phone. They can't get in there, you submit it, and then you wait till it gets to the top of the pile, and then they go, you screwed up these 4 boxes, they just reject it. So there's really, you know, it's very difficult. I've done a lot of consult for people on that, but there's some stuff you don't need permits for, which is nice. So that's the one thing they're gonna have to weigh out, the drawback. If we regionalize that now, if it's allowed, like you can build a secondary structure, like we did the Sergeant Family Community Fund did that project with Matt Clark. They originally told him he needed a permit. I looked it up, and the 10B was able to find, as long as it's this far setback from there, you can build an ancillary garage without, you don't need a permit. You just gotta file notice.
In one of the
to do it.
plantations
In
or.
the plantations,
So
so
under LUPC.
under LUPC, and so that's, I think, an important thing. I think it's a great thing, and I think we put in there and say, do that. But there's gonna be some plus and minuses to that, and I think the biggest thing that we need to make sure as a community in Rangeley is that this does not become a succubus for us of our team's resources, and financially, we're saying, but most of them are paying in the LUPC, like Sandy River, I think pays in $40,000 a year. That was dumped into this budget, it still doesn't cover
Dallas mentioned.
half a person.
And that came, Mr. Chair, that came up in the meeting, was the finances of it, and, you know, on the enforcement side, if our team were to go into those areas, and there would be an expense, and the Rangeley taxpayers spoke about that. And the chair of the board of assessors in Dallas said, you know, we get $112,000 a year. Our residents give that to Lupic for permitting purposes, and that would be on the table. Unfortunately, a comment that I heard was $100,000 doesn't go very far, actually, which I disagree with, but that was the sentiment.
Yeah, and I mean, I
I
think
can
it's something
on
that's,
that, because if that's what the town is paying for them, aren't they also still paying permit fees to LUPC also?
yeah, it's,
She was talking about the
it's a-
totality of what was being paid.
Right, okay.
And-
the biggest, and the biggest problem that you have with LUPC, which we would be able to eliminate, is inconsistency. They're inconsistent, and it depends on what administration is sitting there.
Okay.
For instance, when I used to do permits at Saddleback, my last permit I did was the Europe, which was at the base of the Kennebago. I did it in 8 days. But I also had Governor LePage had already called down and said,
Get it done.
this permit needs to be written, if that requires me to sit in your office, Commissioner, until it's done, I will. But it all depends on, it does depend, I'm not picking on Governor Mills, she's a lot of good things she's done, but there's challenges and what stands out there with that part, so it's just a bigger bureaucracy, but that's going to be some of the drawbacks, because for us, the easiest thing for Rangeley to do is if they want to regionalize, say, okay, then you're gonna have to adopt some of the basic principles of chapter 38, because we're not gonna revisit
Yes.
that.
That's the biggest challenge.
You're gonna have to come under our rules rather than we adapt to yours,
And
if you
also,
want us to do that.
That sentiment was expressed by one of the elected
Yeah.
folks from Rangeley.
that they would have to adopt zoning
Right,
and that.
yeah, and Saddleback's a whole nother piece, trust me.
They have.
That was my
LUPC
job
has
for 10
established
years.
zones.
Yeah.
They're just not the same as ours.
Yeah.
They're different.
Yeah, and I don't think that's a big reach, other than it actually will provide some opportunity, because if they rezone, there's some stuff like Don Green's piece and a few others that are huge tracts of land that right now are restricted on what they can and can't do. So I mean, it's not a bad thing to look at. I think it would take off a little bit of the pressure in town, actually. Allow a few things. So I mean, but I think a separate task force would need to be set up, and there's quite a bit of layers to that onion. It's not as simple as saying, okay, today you're an LUPC and tomorrow you're under Rangeley.
Right.
I mean, it's gonna take, I would think, 24, 36 months, and it's gonna take a group of people that clearly understand. Former code enforcement officers,
That's what I was saying, as far as
attorneys.
we're concerned with our comp plan, though, there's not too much.
No, I think we
Like
could, I think we just
continue
color in there and
investigating
say we're
support.
open to regionalization of any of our services, so. Why wouldn't we be if it can help us?
Right.
Provide better protection to the community as a whole, and they're willing to do that. I mean, they could just, the real easy way would be any of these plantations just get annexed by the town of Rangeley, then it's taken care of.
Annexation.
I don't see them doing that.
I don't think I'll recommend that.
Yeah.
No, but I'm saying that's the easiest way for them to adopt all those things. Yeah, it would be instantaneous.
Sounds like building an empire to me.
No, but I'm saying, well, the town of Ellsworth is way bigger than Rangeley and all our plantations put together. It's the largest town in the United States, I think. So look it up. So anyways. But I think Carl's right. I mean, I think we just keep it open for regionalization of those pieces. It's good to hear that they want to try to make some changes.
I think generally in this plan though, regionalization is something that can cross a lot of paths. And, not like we saw when we were over in Eustis the other day. That ought to be in a lot of the language here, is that we be open to regionalization, whatever thing is for more, the obvious answer to that is cost savings and more clout. So,
Right.
I think that should run itself through a lot of the pieces, I would say.
Yeah, more
Housing.
leverage obtaining
Leverage.
grant funding as well.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Alright.
that's
So
the main
let's
driver.
slide it.
Yeah, because
Anything that
it's
gets weighted into the
cooperation.
front?
Yeah.
Joe, is there anything else from the plantation meeting?
That's all I
If
have.
not, let's slide into the other meeting, which gets us into what you guys were just talking about.
So that
Darn.
too was a very well attended meeting. It was a great conversation. People were very happy to be there. I think all of the communities were represented, weren't they?
Yeah, and even an extra one too. We had someone from Phillips that was there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So, they're having problems with housing just like we are, problems with transportation,
healthcare. the
Healthcare.
Although Kingfield does have a pharmacy,
Right.
so they felt a large sense of
And a
relief
health
when
center.
that happened, yeah.
Yeah, so I think we had a discussion about climate change and what's happening there and how we look at things. I have to learn more about this, but I don't think they have a housing authority, but have you learned anything else about that, Steve?
No, but I'm gonna follow up.
For what,
there's a-
what?
Well, there's an organization called the Western Maine Mountains, it's a.
Yeah, I'm very
weird name.
familiar with it.
Western Maine Mountains, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
housing,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
So
it's it's Paul Peck,
Paul
John
Peck,
Gray.
Joe Gray,
Yeah, I know all
Tim
those guys.
O'Neill, so
Yeah.
do I.
Yeah,
Well, and once I found out that they were on this thing, I immediately talked to Donna afterwards, I'm gonna reach out to those guys, because the thing about it is, I was pretty intrigued by the idea of having a regional housing authority. Because of what I said earlier about cloud, about, at what, when.
and some of us ready to work on that, so just so you know, I've got a couple guys who've been talking about it. So-
Well, I think a lot of people have talked, the older I get, the less patient I am, like I said, that meeting.
I'm right there with you.
I'm about action, and I think.
Well,
the thing
Timmy
is-
O'Neill's done a lot of projects for Turning Point.
Tim- I went to school with Tim in Orono.
Yeah, so he's a.
No, I know Tim
yeah,
O'Neill very
yeah,
well.
He's a good guy.
And Tim is a housing
Tim and
expert.
Bob Monks, yeah, Charlie Gendron.
Yeah, I know all those folks, and the thing about O'Neill is that he's done subsidized housing.
He has.
I've already had a conversation with him about how to get that in Rangeley, but I think the idea of having a regional focus to this was pretty intriguing. I would say, and these guys can back me up, but I think there's pretty much consistent interest in that group. Whether it morphs out of the organization we just talked about,
Yeah.
or it's something we create on our own.
They raised some initial money, I think they got $300,000 to work on that, but they ended up using a lot of it.
They have $1.5 million.
They have $1.5 million.
They have $1.5 million, they can't spend it.
They can't, every time they find a suitable location to try to go forward with permitting and
Not
construction,
my back-
it's
not
all,
my
you get a,
backyard.
you get a NIMBY conversation
Yeah,
happening.
they tried to do it in Kingfield, got blown out of the water.
Yeah.
That was a big project. I think they were talking 100 units?
Well,
Yeah,
they
100
scaled it
over
way
100.
back
Yeah.
during the conversations they had with the town.
Yeah.
And what I said to the guy was, I said, this sounds like a PR problem to me.
Yeah.
So maybe it's their packaging and delivery of the data points, because if you come on like a bull, nobody wants that,
Right.
you know?
Have you met Paul? Paul can
I've
be
met
a
many Pauls in my day.
Yeah, Paul can be a bull, John's good.
Yeah,
I served on the chamber of board in Portland with Paul Peck.
Yeah, you know,
So, yeah, it was.
I like Paul, but he's super direct.
But I guess the question, that, you know, it is, we haven't crafted the housing stuff, obviously, for the plan yet, but I think that it goes to the point of exploring, you know, how long something like this would take, I have no idea. But I think it's a critical issue that, you know, we may be moving on this, you know, early in the 10-year process. And-
Well, the project that Matt Tier and them are doing, they're glad to hand that over to an housing authority once it's built. And, you know, and they're pretty established developers too. I mean, us have been doing this a long time, so.
Right, and they would provide a lot of management and.
Well, a lot of, I don't know, there's a lot of, yeah, I mean, that's a questionable thing, because I've seen a lot of these projects where a lot of the management of that in Western Maine hasn't been the best, so I think that's something that's gonna be looked at, because
Well,
Margaret
and-
Chase Smith project and all those.
Yeah,
But that organization doesn't even include Rangeley right now. right?
No, their
It's
group
all
is
on the other
mostly
side of
all the valley,
Right,
yeah, and they're trying to do, they're looking at a couple projects still, so.
okay.
yeah, so, I mean, that came out of it, it was, people were happy to have the opportunity to come in and talk. And that I thought was, that I thought was very encouraging.
And I think everybody's on the same rough timeline as us. A couple of them have to be done in March, I guess their town
Yeah.
meeting is earlier than ours, but everybody is looking towards spring of 25 to
Yeah,
get this thing
yeah.
done.
and one of the things that was discussed, there was a younger woman there who was talking about sustainability, and then as to Donna's point, climate change did come up, and I mentioned that Rangeley does have a climate action plan. And that, you know, sometimes it's silly to reinvent the wheel, and it's public information, and by all means, and some of the people that were, I think it was mostly the Eustis Stratton people were like, oh, because they were trying to come up with something and they probably didn't realize that we had one. So it's, I mean, even just sharing little, you know,
Yeah.
bodies of work.
Maybe we should build like a
this.
shared resource drive. and put
It
some
wouldn't
of
be a
that to-
bad idea.
You know, like a Google Drive that those guys can access to and that has information, because I think it's good resource, it's all public information.
Right.
It's not like trying to hide things, why reinvent the wheel when you're trying to work with a series of groups, and I know a couple other towns people that are working on other comp plans, and I gave them some suggestions and advice on where to look at too, so.
And I would, AdCog does that anyway,
Right.
you know, because they're working on all of them. So that was really AdCog that set that meeting up and had, because they have,
Well, maybe they can set a joint
Yeah.
resource spot on their website or something.
because that's what we talked about, to make sure that, you know, we don't have something in the Rangeley plan that
Competing
conflicts
priorities.
with.
Well, it'd be
with
great to
this.
be able to pull stuff that's already been approved by the state in the
Right.
prior plan, so you can
Mhm.
at least you're tweaking something you know that's already approved versus
Mhm.
something that hasn't been approved, and you run into some challenges. So that's good, sounds like it was a good group.
It was, yeah, I think it was a very good meeting.
So who was there from the other towns?
One thing they didn't do is nobody introduced anybody.
Yeah, I know, really.
It was so, yeah, I
A
mean,
lot
I
of
guess
them knew each other, except.
they
we
all
didn't.
knew each other, you know,
Except
except
for
for,
you guys.
except
We
for
didn't
us
know.
from Rangeley. But it was perfectly fine. They were very gracious. It just, you didn't go around the table and say.
Yeah, I
"Who's
had
who."
no idea who was
No.
who or where they were from.
I was just curious if
or-
like Bob Luce or any of those guys showed up.
I think Bob Luce, because I only know him by sight. I think he was there. Yeah.
And Beaupre got done, the new town manager they have for Pure Bass.
He was there,
Yeah,
I
I haven't
talked
met
to
him
him.
yet, I heard he's a good guy.
young guy, outdoors guy. Yeah, I
Yeah.
talked
Oh,
to him
yeah.
afterwards, yeah.
Good. Well, great, it sounds like some good inroads there.
Mhm.
Did we lose Valley? Okay, so let's move on to new business, results of the business survey. Donna.
So we had 14 surveys returned. I would say there were no huge, no huge surprises in there. There was a lot of talk about housing being an issue for hiring and, And, you know, we talked about, let's see, I have
Do we get those results in some form?
Yes,
to us?
there's, it's very easy to read, I can, Joe shared it with me, and so I'll just share it with
Yeah.
all of you, I'll send that out to you tonight. But, you know, I mean, they're 50% said climate change affected their business, 50% said no. We talked you know, there was some stuff about one of the obstacles to doing business in Rangeley was, was the shoulder seasons and how can we get more people, and you know, there was a little bit of talk about Airbnbs. You know, I don't think this Airbnb issue is done.
No.
I think it's,
Um,
I think though, at least from what I've pulled for data this summer from my usual sources, is that there are so many Airbnbs that didn't rent at all this summer.
Yeah.
So what you're seeing is, and that's starting to pop up, is people renting out. Like I just talked to somebody today that had an Airbnb right on Main Street. She just signed a deal to rent to 3 Saddleback employees for 6 months. So, I mean, I think, I'm a big fan of, you know, government does certain things, but I also like market conditions.
Yes.
And I know everyone was in a panic, but there's a lot of people that bought when things were going up and done these things, but I think we're gonna see an adjustment there, and it's gonna be a little more flexibility of, I've never seen people posting that they had available space, and now I'm seeing a new listing every week. And it's just starting to, people are starting to hedge their bets.
That's happening all over the country right now with
Yeah.
short-term rentals, and the market got saturated. I mean, that's
Right.
really what happened.
We
And a lot
had
of
300 new
people,
ones up here, it was crazy.
Plus the pricing, people trying to get too much money.
it's
You know,
it's crazy.
Too many
$200 to clean.
Well,
the
there's a
place afterwards.
program out there, and people used to submit these to me when they came to me for loan applications on the commercial side and residential letter. It's like it's called like an Airbnb, can't remember the name of it now, but it's a
They-
website,
They scrub it with the data.
and they go out and they do it, and they run this analysis.
Oh,
Like
yeah,
Air DNA.
Air
DNA,
DNA.
yeah.
So I've got a fraternity brother a beta brother who lives in Texas, is like, I'm gonna buy an Airbnb, and I go to him, I said, Pete, I said, this is what you have to do. I said, you gotta run the average rental numbers, and I said 29% occupancy. And if your financials don't work at 29% occupancy, you don't buy it.
Right.
Well, these guys say, and this realtor said, and this so-and-so said, I go, it's first, you know, especially looking at new construction, you have no idea what it's gonna do in the market, because there's so many units coming on. I said, it's, in 15 years of monitoring this, the ups and the downs, you know, 2001, everything there, it's 29% is a good number. That's what the hotels look
Yeah,
at
but
in
you know, the
Rangeley.
thing about Rangeley though is that a lot of the Airbnbs are second homes.
Exactly.
So
I
they're
was
not,
just gonna say that.
29% would be awesome for a lot of people.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
for some, but there are people
They're
who
financially
buy,
dependent on.
there are
Yeah,
people who
they're
buy
not-
2 or 3 and stuff like
Right,
here, that
right.
there. And I
They're
think you're
creating
gonna
a
see,
business out of it.
I think you're
yeah.
gonna see a tip in the market that's gonna adjust and it's gonna allow some there. I
Has there
think a
been any
lot of workforce.
update from the state on
Well,
STR
so-
regulations?
Yeah, the
No,
LUPC has come up
they
with
did.
some pretty tough rules that are tougher than.
Well, I've read the rules that they proposed, did they?
They actually enacted them, and I didn't think they were that tough.
I didn't think they were.
I thought they were
as bad.
pretty
Yeah.
basic.
It's just
basically
like,
registering.
yeah, you
them.
sign up on a list and you have to have like inspected for safety and fire.
But did that
Well, that must have
change
been
any of the
different than the ones I saw,
designation
because there was an
from-
occupancy size and
The
rules.
one I saw also defined them as commercial,
Yes.
did that stick? That
That's
was the-
I don't
the
know,
sticky wicket
Carl,
with
about
the
that
whole
one.
conversation,
Yeah.
because
So there is
some are
a
and
state
some aren't.
statute that was approved. on it.
Well,
Yeah.
for LUPC.
They amended chapter 10, we should
Well,
take a look at it.
not for the state as a whole, only for the territories,
Okay.
you know, the plantations and territories. And it ended up, you may have seen an earlier thing, they threw everything out there. But what ended up coming back was a.
Pretty
very
watered
nice,
down.
simple
No,
thing,
it's
yeah,
basic, yeah.
you know.
But-
I was wondering though, when you said that there was a lot of comments about it in the survey, what was the theme there?
Yeah.
People
Well-
didn't like it or did it?
So the comments are on both sides of the issue. You know, the comments are, we need them for tourism. And because they're there for tourism, we don't have them for employee.
Okay.
And so, you know, I mean, they're really running both sides of the argument on that. And so I think, I mean, there's some new softwares out there and AvCog has it, and I think that Braintree has an agreement to, or maybe that's part of your standard
Part of it.
agreement on that, where they can do, so people have written these programs to go in and pick it out, you know, like, cause it's all public, you
Right.
go on Airbnb, you go on VRBO, you can see exactly what it is, and they pull it all together. And so I think it would be interesting to look at that and see, Erica had done that in the spring, and I think there were something like 330 of them in the region.
Right.
Are there still 330 or are there more, are there less? And is it someone who has a second home? Or like in South Portland, what happened is there were people going in and buying
Right.
multiple places to turn them all into short-term rentals.
And that's a commercial enterprise.
And that's totally different than I have a house and I wanna make enough money to pay the taxes or something like that.
Right.
And I'm gonna, you know, keep it for myself for July and February or whatever I'm gonna do. And so that's a very different situation
Of
than
course.
someone buying that up. And so I don't know, like, I think that Morton Furbish oversees a lot of these and provides the management for them. And I need to talk to them and see what they think in terms of that question about who owns what? And are these people with one place or is this a business for someone?
That nuance you described is, you know, in my old job, I was a lobbyist in Augusta on this exact issue, and Airbnb was a client of ours. I was a member of Hospitality Maine, and the dividing point is pretty much what we were just saying. It's like, is this a home rental or is it a business? Unlicensed hotels, we would call them, because they're not regulated like hotels, but people are building, and you may see some of this stuff right too. People are building places strictly for Airbnb
Mhm.
or short-term rentals, I should say. That's not a good thing, really. When that was what we were arguing against, but we never argued against a person with a second home or a
Right.
person that used it part of the time on their own.
But that's we have an ordinance, I think we've always had on the books here that anyone can rent their house out.
Yeah,
Anybody
well, there's a
can.
long
Like, I
history
Right.
of doing that before there were short-term
Yeah,
rental.
you rent out a
platforms,
room.
that's what people
Plus
did.
the Mrs. Murphy clause gets in there if it's 4 units or less, so that's
Yeah.
the old rule.
So I don't know, we don't want to get too far off.
No, but I
track
think,
here,
I think the important thing is I think the market's changing. It may do this again, but I think we're kind of ebbing.
I think you're 100% right.
I think
And so, especially with whatever happens, however you think with the election, I think regardless of the election, we're in a recession by second quarter.
Well, this is, I know, one last thing on this, I'll just bring in history, because that's what I am, a history guy.
Yeah.
And you go back in time, we talked, I wrote about that, 2,000 hotel rooms or lodging accommodations back 100 years ago. And we have a lot less than that now.
Yeah.
Unless we're prepared to start building hotels, then we're gonna have a problem over the next 10 years in terms of supporting growth in hospitality.
Right.
So I think
If
that's
it
gonna be the
continues,
argument
but
that's to be made.
you're watching the community kick back on that.
Yeah.
I mean, not funding the chamber for promotion of the area was a real strong message, I think.
Yeah.
Wasn't the best written article, no offense to the person who wrote it, but.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the best written article we put in there, but regardless, we originally set that up when we were. I'm the one who pushed it and moved it from 25 to 50. It used to be 25 could go into whatever chamber operations. I switched it to 50,000, 100% dedicated to promoting the area.
To destination
And,
marketing.
and we did a lot with that with the destination marketing, and
Yeah.
during the years that Saddleback was closed, we used it to really push snowmobiling, and it made a big difference. It's often impact, but now we're at a point where you talk to the average citizen spend here, and I think it's because there was no break during COVID for the 1 or 2 years, and everybody was stressed out in those pieces, that some people are really almost switched to anti-tourism at this point, feeling that we've gotten too big and we're pushing towards the Bar Harbor, Blue
Yeah,
Bay
except
Harbor
we
kind of
aren't.
center.
We're nowhere as big.
We're
as
nowhere
we were
near, but
before it
to
used
some,
be.
the alarmists, you know, they're ringing the bell on that pretty hard.
We
And
did learn a new term at that meeting though, and this has to do with how people visit areas, especially remote areas.
Yes.
And this would be something to keep our eyes wide open on. And what do they call it? Sexy camping? Hip camping.
Oh,
camp.
hip camp, hip
Yeah.
camp.
Yep, hip
Yeah, I've heard
camping.
that before.
So
Backyard
that's-
parking.
Yeah, so you're a homeowner and you've got the back 40 there and you throw a campsite in
Yeah,
there, and I think
I have a
that you
coworker
have
who did that down in Norwalk. That's
like
great.
3 or 4, you might be able to get, I don't know, I forget what the state limit is before you become a campground, but
I think it's
Right.
4, that's what they said in the.
yeah, so
it's
you
4.
do 3 and, you know,
But that
maybe-
could drastically change the rural environment of Maine, of Rangeley, especially when you have a lot of your growth outside of the village center. So imagine a, you know, a development, you know, one of the, on my old road, Quimby Pond Road, there's lots of roads with lots of developments up there. If every one of those houses had 4 or
They can't.
3
They can't.
camps, I'm just saying, I mean, you know.
They can't for our zoning, so.
Yeah,
Our zoning doesn't allow for it, not paid camping, that's considered a commercial activity.
On your
Hip
land.
camp is considered big
If
commercial.
you take it as a paid overnight and you allow people, it's a commercial activity.
That's funny, because that's in conflict with short-term rentals.
Cause we,
It is.
It's basically the same thing.
we define, well,
Well, there's an
rental is a
exception
dwelling
in the
unit.
code for that.
Camping is not a dwelling,
No,
like,
yeah.
it's not somewhere. for
You're
someone
allowed
to reside.
But the
Specifically to
intention-
rent your dwelling unit,
Yeah.
but you
You
can't,
know,
yeah.
So
So
we define an individual private camp, like somebody could do it for their own individual private use on their property, but as soon as you go and start a pay for service within the town of Rangeley
Yeah.
limits. it
Well,
will
that's a
be-
good safeguard then,
Yeah.
because, you know, I mean, that could turn into a nightmare,
Yeah.
you know?
We've had a lot of people reach out on that, by the way, in my 4 years here, we've
They
had a
call
lot
it
of,
hip camping?
not hip camping, but hey, can I just throw up a 10 by 10 platform in my backyard and
Go for yurts and
put it
stuff,
on, yeah, well, not even, just
Yeah.
allow people to come and put, nope, are you paying, are you charging overnight? Nope. It's a commercial activity in a residential zone, not allowed. So.
Actually, hip camp is the name of the website.
The platform,
It's
yeah.
the
Yeah,
platform.
no,
Yeah.
yeah.
oh, well, we'll have to see if there's
All right.
any arrangement.
Anything else from the regional meeting other than
No, I don't think so.
friendly but didn't introduce you? That's interesting combo.
Well, I would say that was Erica. Cause she started the meeting off, just kind of, it was like a jalopy going down a hill.
She's great,
She's
and
great.
she got everybody together, but yeah, it, you know, and I definitely underestimated how long it took to get Stratton. And so Steve and I were a little late, and then we couldn't find it, and we were,
Oh, there's a lot of construction on 16.
Yeah, that's what I was telling you.
yeah, Wendy.
Wendy warned you, I saw the message. She
Yeah.
warned you.
I know, I saw the message at 11 o'clock that night, I was like, oh.
So do we need
Just see
something
that part of the message.
just
specific
takes
in
forever to
our
get
comp plan and housing then for investigation of a regional housing authority or something?
Yeah, I think,
Yeah, that should be in our comp.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But to me, I think,
Explore it, you
to
know?
me, I think if we do a housing authority, it really should be Rangeley, possibly the plantations. I don't see us
Well, we wouldn't define that,
piggybacking in
we
with
would
everything
just-
over there. We might pool some of the, you know, consult with some of the same
I
there,
would,
but
I wouldn't say never to that. I would.
did you read who's on that board?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
Or-
there's not gonna be a lot of bending to.
Well, that's because we're not represented.
But
over
from,
there.
in 10 years from now, I mean, I agree with you that to start with the plantations is a very good idea, and that, those are our close neighbors, and those are the people that interact, they're in our school district, you know.
I'm not opposed to down the road that is,
But-
exactly,
But maybe,
maybe merge, but.
don't say no, never, because it could, you know, it could
Yeah.
coalesce, maybe they're two independent organizations, but those two regions have a collaborative effort on some level in 10 years. who
Right.
knows,
There's
right?
never been a lot of collaboration between the valley and here.
Well, and that should change, because everybody's struggling with the same issue.
That's right, I
Yeah.
mean,
No
that was
one's got a
pretty
solution,
obvious,
So,
that was pretty
maybe-
obvious.
Well,
I think just put it out there as we could look toward that,
Yeah,
but, you know, maybe we won't get there, but. you know. I think if you really want clout, you know, then we'd have a lot more if we were this Western Mountains
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah, I mean-
Franklin, Western Mountain.
I mean, they've done a good job with the transportation piece, they've got that tied in well, should have looked at that part, well, with them, and I know they're still trying to cite a couple spots, I think they figured out a couple spots where they can possibly do something. But it's it's expensive to build that stuff, it's gonna take a lot more than 1.5 million. Right now, until building materials go down, $400 a square foot commercial is what I would figure. 4 to
So how do you,
4.5.
should that go, should we make a note to put that in the draft somewhere?
That we should consider working with regional authorities. for
That's kind of what I
expanding.
said earlier.
Yeah.
Regional should sort of.
It sounds like a global thing.
Well,
Kind of
then just
working in
leave
every
it at
section.
regional, but not
Yeah.
define what that region is.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
Because it's whatever region, maybe Eustis makes sense and
Might be the Sandy River Valley we
And-
combine with, you know.
Kingfield doesn't,
Yeah.
who knows, but just say regional.
They
Um,
battle a lot over there, so,
We can do our own valley, down the Sandy River.
yeah,
Okay.
so Donna, the only thing I'm curious about is there any correlation between the climate concerns and the short-term rentals? Because I felt like both of those were kind of political issues as much as like not, they seem to flow a lot along political lines. At least the short-term rental seemed to when we were dealing with it here. Just how some people viewed it as rights and some people didn't. And I'm not trying to draw heavy conclusions here, but it's
You mean in the business survey when people?
yeah, I'm
talk
just
about
wondering if
that?
they're like, the ones who are like, we don't want short-term rentals, we don't think there's an issue with the climate, was there some correlation with those?
I
Is there-
didn't quite see what you're saying,
Because those seem to run across, that runs correlated with some political platforms, that's all I'm saying.
Right, and one of my questions for folks tomorrow, because I do think we need to talk about it, is, because it was 50-50. Now there's only 14 responses, so, that's not a huge number, but what is it? What aspect of climate change is it? Is it, that we didn't have enough snow and you're in snowmobiling? Is it, or is it some species or?
No, I think it's probably, at least for the winter, it's the snow, I mean, we had an 18 or 20 inch storm this year, and it was the largest storm I've recorded in Rangeley in 5 years. And that was a big
So-
deal, and it used to be, when I was a kid coming up here in the 80s, like, every weekend we got pummeled.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think we're seeing, and skiing can happen with little to no snow, because they can make it.
Snowmobile season short.
Snowmobile season is 3 months,
Well,
and sometimes a
ice
little
freezing,
longer.
Yeah,
It's a
right.
little longer if the lake isn't frozen, and if you've done any snowmobiling around here, if the lake isn't frozen, it drastically changes your experience.
Yeah, it impacts a lot. Yeah.
It impacts it a lot. You've gotta go around both ways, and then you're like, do I really wanna go all the way into town, or do I wanna go this direction instead? So, and that has a direct effect on dollars and cents.
Yeah, so
When the
I,
lake is frozen, you can beat feet from one end of the lake to the other in 7 to 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And that opens up where you go to eat, where you go to spend, where you go to gas, all those things.
Changes plans, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I mean, I think it's, I think that's a part, and how does that get solved? It's, I mean, we don't know. I mean, it'd be interesting, this winter,
Get rid of
all
snowmobiles,
things are
get
set.
ATVs.
then we should have a big winter this winter. We don't have a big winter this winter, then we definitely got some climate issues going on.
Still on the fence.
What's that?
Should still.
I know that with conversation with the main
No,
guides
but-
for fishing specifically, the fisheries have been affected by the warming
Yeah.
river temperatures. And
Huge
the
impact.
fish are not moving in the same ways that they normally do.
It's like
There-
every degree affects a certain amount of parts per million of oxygen.
Right, and there's, within that fishing community, there's a lot of conversation about new anglers that are out there that don't have a clue about how to safely deal with, fatigued fish, because it's the water's too warm in July and they're out there fishing it. I mean, you pull a brook trout out of the Megalloway and it's 90 degrees, it's gonna die, you know?
Yeah, I mean, they just had that issue recently with the guy set some clown set a fish
Gill
net.
net, yeah,
Gill net up, I mean. So I
on
mean,
private property.
In a
Yeah.
river,
What's that?
in a river.
Yeah.
on the Megalloway,
On the Megalloway.
that's like sacrilege about. That's probably the biggest sin you could commit to a fly fisherman, is somebody doing.
Yeah, and it makes private property owners
Yeah.
not excited
We're
about
still
it.
dealing with abusive private property owners on ATVs and that stuff there. and I
Yeah.
think Those are all.
I think that that's a big, you know, in terms of, maybe we're drifting a little bit, but in terms of the economy conversation for Rangeley is there's a lot of large private property owners that, you know, like the snowmobile club and the ATV club, that, you know, the connectivity of the trails is dependent upon them allowing access.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, it would behoove a regional approach to educate our visitors what's appropriate and what's not. Because they'll close trails if behaviors, you know, egregious,
Right, right,
and that would be horrible.
yeah.
Does the town do anything currently with like acquiring property rights or easement rights to prevent?
In the
stuff like that
last
from
plan,
happening?
there's an actionable step written that's, and it was never done or looked at, to research into some type of a tax benefit for people that allowed trail access through their land, which I don't think is a bad idea.
Well, they can get through the open space program,
Right,
you know, through the open space, you know, there's tree growth, farmland, open space. And through the open space program, the way that works, it's on a sliding scale. So if you go down, and I think to get the biggest reduction, you, which I think might be 95%, so 95% reduction in your value is if you allow public access. And then, you
You had
know,
one of those in town, if I remember right.
Not so long ago, yeah.
what, one of those,
An incident where a property sold and it came out of the open space. It was
which is a big deal.
quite a lump sum that somebody had to come up with.
Right, so there is a
Oh, is that
program for
retro?
that.
Yeah, it's-
Pay back then? On something
it's like
that?
taking a
There's a
property out of
penalty.
tree
Yeah,
growth,
we'll
you
talk
have
about
to
it
pay
later.
all that back.
Right, if it's,
quite
I mean, if
it's
you
an
do it
interesting
for a long
thing.
enough time, you don't, but, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's-
if it's shorter term.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in tree growth and you gotta have tree plans, you gotta do all the stuff, if you
Yeah.
don't do it, it's huge penalties, I've helped clients deal with that, and the penalties are astronomical. It's like all the tax back plus 25%.
That's an interesting idea about easements, you know, is it town pursuing recreation easements on some of these things?
Yeah, they're key pieces.
Just buy them
that-
out.
Right, and
And
what-
aside from tax incentives.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen those, Massachusetts does that a lot, I dealt with a farm down in Worthington, Mass, where they had X amount of developable acres. And they signed an agreement to have the restriction put on the property, in exchange, they got like 100,000 versus
Yeah,
spending the 300.
where I used to live, the towns were building rail trail networks through, you know, hundreds of miles and they were buying it.
So that way it was in perpetuity and there was no
Correct,
question.
yeah,
when it closed.
yeah, it was closed and it was owned by the town, maintained
It's
by the
like the,
town and,
what White Mountain trails are all like that too.
yeah, yeah, preserved it,
It's
right?
something to seriously consider if
A
we're
nice
worried about the
discussion for
impact.
the future too, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
I mean, especially with, you know, the zoning language too, I remember that we worked on this too, is if there is an existing trail and a development is planning on going in, they have a requirement or responsibility or gently asked to have the trail either go through or circumvent the development.
right, and we did some incentive-based things also, that you could, if you did certain things, you could get extra lots. I think that was like on the dead end roads. And.
Well, I think that's where we could offer these bonus
Yeah,
structures, say, okay, if you put a public easement through of this type of thing, we'll give you a density bonus.
Right.
right.
Which,
In
which
a
works to
subdivision.
works to a developer pretty easy though.
Yeah, and the DEP gives a very significant, a very significant reduction in that you don't have to go through site location.
Right,
If a certain percentage of land goes to a land trust of the town
correct.
or the city, whatever.
The kingdom lots, so to speak, yeah.
Yeah, and so,
Very popular to know they did that in Brunswick and a few other areas.
yeah, I mean, it's a big incentive because not only is it maybe $75,000 or $100,000 getting the application together, it's another 6 months,
Right,
so.
yeah. Plus lawyers.
Yeah.
Joe, what time we have to stop at?
It's up to you, you're pushing 5:30 now.
Right,
Could we talk about, so we've been using this Google Drive. We're getting at the point where we're gonna need to start reviewing chapters. And how are we gonna do that? Should we have a chapter review subcommittee? I mean, what do you think? Or do you wanna just different people agree to review certain chapters? I mean, there's a lot of different ways that we could go about this, but I think, or we just do what we've done
I
and
think you
put it
just
up on
hold the
Google
chapters
Docs.
up and then we make notes.
Okay,
And give you some feedback. And then you take collectively the notes, provide us back the draft, and then we do a final comment. Because what I don't want to
Okay.
get into is, and I see that happen often at the BOS level, is it should be an active part of that, where when you come with a final draft for us to do in a meeting like this, it's at least been workshops.
At least once, yeah, I know
Yeah.
that's awful when you're seeing.
I saw,
something
what was it,
11th
2
hour.
meetings ago, you were making a bunch of notes.
Yeah.
Comments on a ordinance, and I think that's frustration to those who work on it. And
Absolutely,
frustration there, so I think it's important to at least
How many chapters are there? 10,
13, right?
13.
And when are we- when are we
13 now
trying to
with
be
climate
done?
change, right?
Yeah, and I think we just start, I think,
What I'm saying, do we open and do one a week and give a week period? Cause I know if I don't have a deadline, I'm
Yeah.
gonna push it to the side. So if we say, let's start at chapter 1, everybody get the comments in, you have till the end of the week. I'd rather do something like that.
yeah, and then
Um,
I think a procedure be really, I agree with Carl, say, okay, chapter 1's up. You've got comments now to the 30th, and then like on the 29th, Donna has programmed in her notes to
Yeah,
send a
last fall.
reminder email, say, you haven't looked at those, Carl, Chris.
Yeah. I'm the worst person at that. If
Yeah,
I
me
don't have
too.
a deadline, I will, I have my
Yeah,
mind.
you're
I got so
on
many
the
other things.
afterburn.
Yeah.
So.
Is that too much
That's mine.
expectation on you, Donna?
No, that's fine, but I wanna make sure this is public because is this, are we using your Gmail account?
No, that's a
No?
Gmail set up for,
It's a Google Doc,
yeah,
so it floats
well,
around.
it needs to be,
So is that a town thing, the Google?
no, but I mean,
No.
look, once we get it, you workshop a draft, we give you the comments, and we come back, and when it's gone through the committee, and we feel like it's at a good point, then we post it on the website, take public comment,
Okay,
we do the final review, so it's 3 steps. You do a
Yeah.
draft,
alright,
open it up for us to comment, you do the second draft, bring it in, we approve the second draft, it then gets posted on the website for public comment, and then 3 weeks or whatever later, we finalize it. And then we know that's the next step to go. We can
Yeah.
even,
Well, just like-
send, after we get the public comment back before it goes into final, we can then send it off into the BOS and say, do you have any additional comments before we finalize? That we've got their buy-in.
So when we get public comment, or is it coming back to us to revise or?
Yeah, public comment back to us, BOS, and then final. So I'd say that way it's gotten 4 shots. Donna, the committee, public, the
Refresh my
BOS.
memory a little bit, but who's writing all the initial drafts at this point? Donna, you're not writing every one of them, right?
That's what I understood.
Well, I know
I'm
you
not
get
writing
one,
every one of
you
them,
know.
What?
I'm not
I didn't
writing
think
every
you were
one of
writing
them.
No, you were writing a chunk of them now, right?
I'm writing a chunk of them, right, we have a spreadsheet and it says.
Yeah, that's why I said refresh my memory, because I feel like, I thought we were gonna dole out certain sections to different people. But I may be wrong.
Yeah, and you and I worked on the introduction, you did the historic one,
Right.
I was gonna work on the business one when it gets finalized
Yeah,
on these
and-
meetings.
Yeah, after we get this meeting tomorrow, I think we start going and
And
see.
you have the natural resource one
We have the
pretty
natural-
much done.
Outdoor recreation is not.
Yeah, that is, yeah, we have some stuff from the land trust on that one, and we have, AvCog does.
Why don't you send out,
population and demographics and.
why don't you send out which ones we still need to have somebody fill in
So-
for?
Should,
Put my name on them.
okay, there's a spreadsheet.
Okay.
And,
You mean our big spreadsheet?
not your spreadsheet on stuff that, recommendations from the last plan.
No.
This is a different spreadsheet.
All right, why don't we
It's more what Joe and I use.
Yeah, why don't we go out that and, you know,
I'll send that out to everyone.
you see,
That would be
from
helpful.
what I understood, you're gonna do most of the heavy lift, but we're gonna fill in some other areas.
Right, and
Where-
AvCog,
Like Steve had a lot of interest in the history, so he grabbed it and ran with it.
Right.
That's
But I
great.
thought everybody was taking a chapter, I thought it was a.
That's
sort
what
of
we
a
did
sign
say,
that.
we did say that, we did,
yeah,
yeah.
I mean.
Cause I don't know what you're contracted for to do, how much work, you know, just to the point where we're doing. I don't know. Scope wise, so to speak.
We're okay for right now,
I think that this is totally doable, but I think that we really need to start getting this
Yes.
done because
Yeah,
the board has to have enough time to review it.
Yeah.
And the
That was
public
my
has to
question as
have
far as
enough
working
time.
backwards. When are we submitting this? When
We
does
were
this-
shooting for next June, I
Next
thought.
June?
So
But that's for the
That's the
meeting.
vote. So
That's
it's gotta
the
be
meeting.
done by what?
It should get to
February
the
or
Board of
March.
Selectmen by like April, March, something like
Say
that.
end of
I would
March.
say February.
That's what I
Yeah,
said,
February.
Do I hear January?
Right,
February.
so,
If you could do January, I would appreciate that.
No, so say early February, and that gives us what, October, November?
At least from what
December?
I've seen
4
lately
months
that
to
goes
do
in front of the
13
board, they don't
chapters?
really pick a lot of it apart.
Most of it, they get's been,
Yeah.
worked through for the most part.
Yeah, so it's more of,
I guess
unless
my point
something's
was
overly glaring, I don't see it's gonna be.
13 chapters, and we're gonna do one at a time, we have like a week each one.
yeah, and I
You
would
know?
also recommend too, that once, each person does their segment, you can divvy that up, I think we already have that information somewhere. Somebody's gotta put it together and make sure that the fonts are all the same,
Yes,
that the
yes.
headers are all the same,
Yeah.
that the
That's
format, that it's the numerical pages are in there, because otherwise it's gonna be a salad, you know?
There needs to be a final
Yeah.
draft.
That's
in
not
that
a, that's
format.
not a
That's-
difficult thing.
No, it's not, but I'm just saying.
But
it's
it
gotta
has
be
to,
done.
yeah, there has to be, it has to have a style.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes. And so I think that, yeah, that's all good. Joe and I have been talking about how, what he needs in terms of getting this to the town meeting in June. And so, yeah, there's a lot of different pieces in the works.
so I'm willing to take on a couple chapters because I have enough time to work on it. Cause I know that you guys are very busy
can
during the
still-
day.
yeah.
I
If
mean,
I know what I need to do and I have a deadline, I will get it done, that's how
no,
I.
but I mean,
work.
at
me
that
too.
point, and I don't mind at all if someone edits and fixes and makes comments at all, but at least just to get something there,
Do you wanna, maybe you could do the business one?
I'm happy to do that. yeah.
And, because I've been working on the public service one, which I wasn't gonna do, but kind of just took that on to get that one rolling also, and so.
Well, let's get the tasker list
Yeah.
together, let's get that together, take every chapter, put a name next to it. And if it's gonna be more, there's no issue with collaborating, so if
Mhm.
two people say, if you wanna work on that, and do that there. I've got a busy couple months, but I'll, if you
Yeah, I
tell me
can
what I
make
gotta
that
do and that's there, then I'll just make it happen.
Just
And
for other
then-
what you need, they're all in Word documents, I'm assuming,
Yes.
right? So are we tracking all our changes, are we gonna do
That's what I
anything
would
like
do.
that?
That's what I would do.
Well, if we try to do this and track changes, it's gonna get really confusing.
I think so.
I don't.
Well, I think depending on how many people are
Yeah, I
touching it, I mean, maybe the first couple people may butcher it up, but I would figure by the end, it's gonna.
Well, I mean, don't we have to show to the board? I mean, we're doing a revision, we're not doing a
I
replacement.
think we would have-
We have to
We're
show what the
doing a new
original was
plan.
and what.
We're updating a plan. It is a new plan.
Well, you can always
It's
just
not-
show the old one and then show what you came up
Yeah.
with at some, at some level, but.
I wanna keep the format as much as possible in that so that it's easy to do that. But if we start trying to change, like track all of the different
I just
language.
didn't know what we had to do, that was more of my question,
Yeah.
were we obligated?
If we're not
We're
required
not
to-
obligated to do
If
that.
we're not required to track changes,
No.
then I say
No.
we don't need to do it.
What about, Joe, you have something?
Geez, I would like to track changes, so if we have individual members or do well working on it. And I'm not saying track it so that the ultimate end user can say, what sentence is different.
Why,
I'm
why
saying
change from managed to-
administratively, if Carl is working on a section, we can look at it and say, okay, you change these 25 sentences. I agree with 24, but I'm gonna make a note about what I wanna talk about with the group when we get together.
Well, that's why with the Google Docs collaborative, all you do is turn on what you do for the change. You can still go over and click it and say, you can go over and click it and say, show it as revised, and you can just read it in normal prose.
Yeah, where'd you
But
get
at
this
least
from?
it's there, so you know what people have changed. It's for a guy like me, that's how we do legal docs all the time, because it saves everybody time.
That's how I
because-
do it as well. And the only reason I ask that too is because sometimes like if I'm reading a section and say I'm reviewing it with you and I don't know what I wanna put, but I have thoughts and feelings on it, maybe I wanna add a note and
Yeah,
ask questions, it's just,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
just trying to
you can
figure out
have
how
notes
we're
on
gonna.
track.
Yeah, I'd rather
collaborate,
say,
not
hey,
be
you know
the
what,
same road.
I don't mind this paragraph, but. I'm not really sure how you wanna reword it, but it should also have this element, and then that way. That note goes in there and it's there, so we can do it. Doesn't mean we can't save, have clean versions that are set there, but I mean.
I think only clean versions go out.
Only clean versions go out, but I
Yeah.
think for us, working it, it's easier. Cause I also wanna be able to go and say, cause we're not always gonna agree on everything, and I see, well, Wendy's got that comment, I might reach out to Wendy, and say, hey, how'd you get there, and then I don't change it. I don't propose anything change, cause I'm like, okay, that's good. I don't know, that's just how I've always done, is
So what are we doing,
collaborate.
track changes or
Yeah,
Google?
we'll do
Track
In
changes.
Google
track
Docs,
change,
just
yeah.
have it so that, and you can make comments, or you can make notes, or
We'll
you can
just
make
see how it goes.
revision.
Sorry.
then when we got the whole thing together, you just accept all.
We still have to figure out who's writing the initial draft that everybody's gonna track changes from.
Well, I guess we'll have.
She has a
Oh.
spreadsheet with the chapters, she's gonna send us that.
I've been doing that.
Okay,
Yeah, you're
And-
starting from the old one in most cases, right?
Right, I've been taking the chapters out and sending them off to different people to get comments on them and, so.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question is, Don, is you've done that part. If you wanna bring it back and be like, okay, I have the comments back, but I haven't taken the time to rework it. Wendy, do you wanna work on this one? Chris, do you wanna work on this one?
Right,
We can take what you've got give us the information and we'll go and run with it.
yeah,
Or we may be like, okay, well, that's there, and then we might say, well, should we reach out to this group or should we reach out to that to get additional info? I
yeah,
mean. That's fine, I think. What we need though is we need a center place where everything is.
which would be Google Docs.
Yes.
Right,
Is it file structure?
And all the Google Docs is, it's like the ones we did there, I just shared it to everybody. In our group, and then everyone has access to access it. And we can choose what makes sense to me is that Donnie, you're gonna store like the final versions where you are, so that way they're not. Someone doesn't inadvertently go in and screw that up. We have a working doc and then we say, okay, this draft is ready for approval from the committee to go to public comment. And then those,
Do we have any file structure in there now?
there's 0 files, so we have 1 file in there. So we can
I
set
would
up a
almost think
file
like a
structure.
file for each chapter.
Well, I mean,
Document per chapter, any backup info you have.
yeah, and then what I would suggest we do then is just make a folder that says, this is how, it sounds stupid, but when I did the PPP applications, I had to deal with 250 applications and everybody was at a different step. So I had like number 1, and that was initial draft, number 2 is that, and then you keep them in the buckets where they are, so you go, okay. You can immediately go to the public comment and go, okay, chapters 4, 5, and 6 are out for public comment. with a deadline of such and such a date. All right, these have gone to the Board of Selectmen. Personally, to me, I don't think handing the Board of Selectmen a 160-page, 13-chapter document at once is gonna be that exciting to them. I don't know if they're gonna have the time to read it, so it'd be really great if we could load in and say, you know, in December.
Yeah.
In
If
December,
they don't have the time, then what human would have the time?
no, but what
Well,
I'm,
let's see, so-
but what I'm saying is that give them 3 chapters in November and 4 chapters in, 3 chapters in December and 4 chapters. As we get through the process with these, even if they're not in the same order, be like, here's 2 or 3 chapters. Here's 2 or 3 chapters. And so that way, when we get to the final version, they get the final review in March. We can say, this is what we did for process, initial gathering information draft, went through the committee for draft, went to public comment, then redraft, got your comments and then draft. And these are the final there, so that nobody feels like they got missed in the process.
Well, somewhere along the lines, just because it is so many pages, I have always, every time I've done a comprehensive plan, just pulled out the individual ideas section and did that as a separate document, because really that's what people wanna know. Is what are you talking about doing here?
recommendations.
Yeah, what are the, and I'm trying to stay away from the word recommendations, but what are the suggestions? What are
Right.
the
The action
options?
steps, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
what's
I
this thing
And
doing? Yeah.
listing that, because that's where the rubber hits the road.
Well, what you're doing, what I think you're doing, and I agree with that, is what I call a USA Today write-up of the chapter.
Right,
And then I also provide the full chapter for those who want to dive deeper.
yes, you wanna dive in, it's here.
But here's
if you want
the
the-
USA Today version with the key
Yeah, here's the action.
changes or
And-
the key actions.
And I have actually at one case gone so far as to work, you know, like think of if you tore out one sheet of the Highlander. And it just had all of the ideas on it in the different, you know, housing, economy, climate change, you know,
Right.
like what all the various ideas
I
are.
don't disagree with that, that sounds
And get
reasonable.
that out, because that's an easier, you know, so now you're giving somebody like,
Yeah, the cliff notes.
what, less than 10 pages. The rest of it's fascinating, but you know, this is the stuff that we're talking about doing. And I think that that's an important step in there.
I think that's gonna work well for, especially this particular board, it's seen their actions on that, is that will be efficient use of
Well,
their
and for the
time.
public too.
Yeah,
You know, because the public, the general public is not gonna read 160 pages, I wouldn't
No.
expect them to, but they wanna know what you're thinking, so.
I like that. So I
Okay.
think we need to have, yeah, like the USA Today or
Yeah,
Fisher,
okay.
I call it Fisher Price, that's what we used to call it also, Fisher Price version. So that way it's easy to follow, and then we obviously still provide the full written chapter for those who want to dive deeper.
Okay,
And I think we need to, if Joe, maybe you can kind of set the stage with the Board of Selectmen and say, we'd like to feed this to you in parts to review, so that way, when we come back to you in March, there's less.
It's a
We're looking for
final-
more of a blessing in March,
February,
February, you wanna do
they
February?
need it by February.
Okay, well then say, look, in order for us to do that for February to
Yeah.
get the blessing, we're gonna have to start feeding you stuff November, December, and
I'm
January.
sure they'll be fine with that.
And,
But I will talk.
and it may be out of order, meaning like Steve's is already the historical. We might, you know,
yeah, I think we could just, if we could just put off on the chapters, because if we say here, you're getting chapter 8 first, then
Yeah, you're getting the
it's just
historical
gonna be,
section.
you know, it just becomes chapter 8, I don't, you know,
Later, yeah.
later.
Are we obligated to have public hearings with this committee, before it goes to the Board of Selectmen?
I don't think that you're obligated, but it may not be a bad idea to
You-
consider that.
I think
It's
once
the
we're ready for public
planning-
comment, we offer a public hearing for that.
Let me read it, because it might be the planning board, the legislature. So does this committee, this isn't a subset of the planning.
No, we report
No,
directly to the Board
To
of
the Board
Selectmen.
of Selectmen.
Yeah,
So we can work with the Board of Selectmen, and say, look, we wanna take 2 or 3 of these chapters at a whack, we'll do a public hearing part of that. Post their review.
Oh, do one combined with them, yeah.
That could be the fifth, that could be, it seems redundant, the step, we may not make June, we might have to push to the next
We
one.
can make sure.
We'll make sure.
Alright, Okay.
Give
Well, I'm
them a
here.
section, give them a deadline.
Yeah, okay. Donna, do we need to cover anything about the meeting tomorrow? I think it's
No,
pretty
I think-
straightforward.
Yeah, I think I'm all set.
Okay.
They asked me at the chamber before meeting, before I came here, as what the format was. And I wasn't sure, but this is basically sort of an open discussion.
Yeah,
We're not breaking out into
No.
groups and talking, that's what some
I will be there, we'll be a little late.
no.
That's what we did in McQuassick, that's what we did in Ramsey. This time
Right.
we're not doing that.
Good.
Yeah, I don't
But-
see the need to do that, I think we,
We want to
just
hear
talk-
everybody in
Yeah.
the same
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
All right, any other announcements? Okay, so when do we want to meet next? I feel like we should get that spreadsheet and then map out our timelines for those things sooner than later.
And then have a report, first report from each group, each
Mhm.
person, who's made progress.
I can meet whenever.
2 weeks, 2 weeks, first week in October?
Oh, I have a real estate closing. Let's see.
It'd be after the 16th or after October, October 16th or after.
Well, that's a month away, right?
Yeah, you wanna meet in 2 weeks?
I don't know, do we? Is there a reason
I
to
don't-
meet within 2 weeks?
I don't think so,
If we
I
have
don't think so,
something
so
to-
long as we keep communicating. And posting and letting folks know, like as things go on and let folks know. I don't think we need to meet as a group. What do you think?
As long as we're working, that's the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, we gotta start pumping out some products.
Yeah, I feel like, yeah, we're not, and I'm
I
fine.
agree with you, totally.
I mean, when we finish with the chapter, the process is we're sending it to you, Donna, or we're sending it to the group?
Well, I guess you send it to me, I put it on Google Docs. Send a notice out to everyone saying
Take a
it's
look.
there,
Okay, yeah,
here's
Give
your
a week.
deadline.
Yeah, here's the deadline.
And,
Well, at that point, it's just
and
making it
then,
a final version before it goes out for a public comment, right?
well, and then we make revisions. Because we wanna have, we have basically, I would call the first draft this committee's draft.
Yep.
And then it goes out and there will be other drafts. But the first draft is something that the committee is seeing.
Mhm.
And then we go out and out to get more comment. And at some point, I think that we're gonna need to have another meeting with the public. And I think that meeting is to talk about the ideas. There's this other draft that's being worked on, but these are the ideas that we're thinking about. So let's talk about these things and what do you think? And I'm not quite sure the best way to go about doing that. It might be to just print them out in large type and let people go see it, or it might be to do a pullout like with the Highlander. I'm
I
gonna
think it should be
about that.
posted on the town's website.
Mhm.
And I also think that, you really wanna have like a flushed out plan at that point that's put together. So we have the highlights, but we also have the plan and the public meeting. And you don't really have to lead that discussion. It's a public meeting. You can say Joe Blow gets up there and talks and he has a question and we answer it and somebody else has a concern and that's it. And then we've presented it.
We don't even need to answer it, so we
Yeah.
can just listen, right? That's-
Well, it's just,
hearing
it's
before
good to
it's
get
like-
feedback and, sometimes people from the public, they're like, hey, you spelled that word wrong, like that's
Right.
inappropriate.
Right.
Or whatever, I don't know what
Right.
to say, but, it doesn't have to be like a big formulated meeting, it can just be a public presentation of the ideas and concepts
Right.
and the actual
Right.
plan in the state that it is at that particular moment.
Right.
And that'll be easy. You know, that's gonna be an easy presentation and it will be an opportunity for more information gathering too.
Yeah, yeah, and it's an important step in the process to get folks involved one more time.
So we want that to be what, November?
I think there's gonna be multiples of them.
Yeah.
I don't, November is too early, I would say either December, Christmas, you get a little,
Sounds like it has to start in
like
November.
maybe the second week of January or something. Let's get through Christmas. And then have a meeting with the public and we can be pulling all of this stuff together.
Yeah, I don't even think December's bad because, you know, usually, lately, there hasn't been much snow up here. Everyone's local, you know, they can get to a meeting.
Okay,
You know,
all right,
I don't think
yeah.
that's, and then, you know, you've always got the weather issues going into winter.
Yeah,
More so than you
yeah.
have in January for the most part.
Okay,
And that gives us another month to get things straightened out after.
right.
And we should be able, it's
So you're thinking to
September,
bring
we should be
them
able
all
to
to
get.
one public hearing,
Pardon?
to bring the entire plan to one public hearing?
Well, I think something, we should present it to the public in the state that it's in December, which should be mostly done. But then the Board of Selectmen will have another public hearing as well, and we should do that in tandem with them.
Right, do we call it a public hearing or, yeah, cause there has to be a public hearing at the planning stage, and there has to be a public hearing at the Board of Selectmen stage.
Okay,
So we
so
have
that
to.
would work, December, and then Board of Selectmen in
Yeah.
January.
So the key to this is we gotta reverse engineer everything back, so Joe's gonna figure out the date
Right.
we have to be ready by, and we just gotta reverse engineer back, and that's gonna
Still
build
the
this.
starting line, yeah.
I don't see how we get there any other way.
Right, do we do those public hearings starting in March? Is that what that March to June is to,
So there's, let's talk about the town meeting process here, exclusive of this for a second. There's the statutory public hearings for things like ordinances, and the town meeting warrant itself, which is at least 7, sometimes 10. Sometimes 14 days if there are chapter 38 ordinances on there, so consider that 14 days back from town meeting, that is statutory, it's required.
From the vote date.
From the day that you're voting in town meeting. In Rangeley, it's customary, since the town went to referendum voting, to have what's called a preliminary public hearing, so to speak, where the public has an opportunity to
Which has no impact.
be heard, and then the elected folks have time to make changes based on what they heard. So, you know, if there's something that's really, you've got to be in the bonnet of the public, the board has an opportunity to say, you know, let's change the wording in this prior to the formal public hearing. At the statutory public hearing, there's no opportunity for change. It is verbatim what's going to be voted on. People already have absentee ballots at that point. So that's kind of the framework for town meeting.
and if they don't like it, they just vote it down.
They have that, they can vote however they choose, that's up to them.
Yeah.
I am of the mindset that this might drive some people crazy because of the requirements. More public hearings are better than fewer public hearings. I know that that's more work for people I work with, but that doesn't mean you wanna have one every week, but you know, if you think you need more than the statutory and the one that goes with it, that's okay. As long as you are ready to have that public hearing. I wouldn't do it and not be ready for it. That is probably not a great recipe, my experience. So I think what we need is a timeline. I don't have that today. We need to work back from now, we need to work back from June town meeting.
Right,
Which we typically do. We build one of those in the fall when we get ready for budget season. So I see if we can get that done a little bit earlier and include everything on it, but.
Right.
So we'll work on that.
okay.
Hopefully that answers the question. Okay.
All right,
We're just gonna circulate that document, who's responsible for what section.
yeah, and then.
I think that's step one.
Refresh that,
Refresh our memories.
get them all assigned.
Yeah, I'll send you, yeah, cause that was something that was done a while ago.
Yeah.
So. Okay, great.
What else we have?
That's all I have.
Yeah.
We set a
Oh,
meeting or
next
date or
meeting
not?
date.
And you got a meeting date, yeah. That's where we started, right? Way back.
That's what that was the first one.
End of October.
It's too far out. Well, I mean, the
Done
purpose
that
of the
for
next
after the
meeting
16th.
would be to get a
She's gone.
census of where we're at.
Yeah, status
already,
update, right? Yeah.
So we need more time after that for whatever the next, milestone is.
How about like the second week in October?
That's what I was thinking. Maybe
Can we do like the 16th or 17th?
16's fine.
It's at the I can't see, the 16th is Wednesday.
That's ordinance committee.
Planning board, no?
Yellow's ordinance, right?
Planning board's the second and fourth.
How about the
Ordinance
15th?
is first and third.
No,
So it's
no, I
ordinance,
can't
what
do
time
that.
do they meet?
Typically 5:30.
The 18th?
It's a Friday.
In homecoming at Orno.
But don't we usually meet before the we can't do the 16th?
4:30 to 5:30 on the 16th?
Sure.
I don't care.
Motion.
I can't make a motion.
We both
You can't do
seconded it.
that, Wendy?
What's that?
You can't do
I
that?
can do that,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
I said I can't make a motion, I can't vote.
Oh, you can't.
4:30 to 5:30 on what day?
16
The
October.
All right, but we're gonna have a check-in before that, long before that.
Yeah, right.
We're gonna have an email correspondence.
Yeah, I think we need to start, ramping up for sure.
Just be conscientious about exchanges of substantive information by email. They really should, in your mind, just think about one-way communications. Here's the list of who's doing what. Here's to Donna, here's my list of corrections. The reason I bring that up, that's the FOA, to avoid the quorum is communicating by email, that's notify the public. Just a reminder, I know you know that, just a reminder.
All right,
4:30. Adjourn.
okay.
Onward.